let's start this thing off, Marcus, with the team that you know very well, the Chicago Bears. Shout out to that Gale Sayers.
Yeah. Gale Sayers, man, legendary right there.
Yes,
man,
sir.
You know what? I expect big things from the Bears this year. I really thought Caleb had a down year, and I think just knowing the competitor that he is, I think that he got in the lab. I think that he really challenged himself in the offseason. I think Ben Johnson coming on board is going to only make him better. He's got all the weapons in the world. They retooled the O-line. I see him having a big year, I think that the Bears, surprisingly are going to win the NFC North. You know what I mean?
And the NFC North? That's the homer in you.
Hey, that's the homer. Here's the thing. It might be a little homer in me, but I think that the coaching matters. You know what I mean? The feng shui of the team matters, the flow of the team. I think that they have the defense to do it. I thought that they lost some close games last year. And I think Caleb Williams did not play good at all.
He didn't. And it's one of those things where he could have played a lot better. And Ben Johnson, obviously coming over, is going to help this offense out. That's the one thing about the Chicago Bears that Bears fans have been clamoring for is like, hey, we want this offense to look the right way, right? Never had a 4,000-yard passer. You play in the Windy City. So we see the offense typically go through the ground game, and at times in the winter, it gets a little bit stout. Well, you bring in an offensive genius who kind of revitalized the offense in Detroit in Ben Johnson, and now you bring that philosophy to this Bears team with that young quarterback in Caleb Williams, and you give him a chance now to develop that the way he was supposed to coming out of college. Caleb Williams was a generational prospect coming out. And I mean, I know you had a chance to see it firsthand and put eyes on it, but Caleb Williams had a lot of expectations coming into year one and didn't realize those. And in fantasy drafts and in general, I think the expectation is that there might be a little bit of wiggle room here for like a leap up. And we saw some of that towards the end of the year where he had, some of those explosive games. You started to get into it, Marcus, but talk a little bit about Caleb Williams. He's going right now as the QB 12, and I think the expectations is that he's probably going to be somewhere around a 3,500-yard passer. Do you think this is the year where he takes the leap and becomes that first 4,000-yard passer, and should we be drafting him in fantasy?
I think this is the year that he takes the leap. I'm not drafting him in fantasy. And you know what? I would if he was my second QB, right? I see myself taking him, not QB1, but for sure QB2. I think he can get hot. I think that he has the element with his run game, you know what I mean, when you get close to the red zone, so he does have that element. He's not a big runner, but he can run, right? And I think I would definitely take him as a QB2. I think 12 is a good space for him, right? He's not a top 10 QB yet, but I think he can jump into that 12 to 15 range and provide some value there.
Yeah, and last year like I said, it was a really strong finish to the season for Caleb Williams. I don't know why I keep saying Caleb Johnson, like Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams, those common ass last names. But with Caleb Williams,
that marriage is gonna work. That's why you keep saying it.
It is, and there's a running back named Caleb Johnson now, so now it's just gonna throw me off for a loop. But Caleb Williams, obviously with a strong arm and now an upgraded receiving room as well, should take that next leap. I think the one thing you have to take him around some really good quarterbacks though. So like Dak Prescott goes in that range, you got Brock Purdy in that range, Jordan Love. So it's like some other names, and then you got like Bo Nix, players that played well last year. So you have to kind of take him in this weird range where you're like, I think he's going to make that leap, but he hasn't proven it yet. If he does, we might be talking about Caleb Williams as like top 5 quarterback, but I don't want to put that on him yet because I think he still has a lot to prove. But this receiver room is going to look a little bit different. He had a veteran presence last year with Keenan Allen. And I think when you have a receiver like that, especially early on in your career, they're a safety valve. It's a good player to have. Mm-hmm. Now you bring in a rookie and Luther Burden, first-round pick, slot guy out of Missouri, and you add an element of, potentially getting open out of the slot. But we're also expecting Odunze, now second-year receiver, to go ahead and make that leap. Also, the team drafted Colston Loveland in the first round, big body tight end out of Michigan. So good product there. How are you looking at this receiving room, Marcus? Because in fantasy, there's a lot of we don't know what to expect with Caleb, and now we don't know what to expect out of this receiving room.
Here's the thing. In fantasy, I'm not taking any of these guys. But as a team, as a collective, I think that they're going to be dangerous because you don't know who's going to take that leap, but they all have that potential, right? That big target tight end. Some people thought it was a reach to take them where they took them. Some people had them tight end 2, tight end 3. I think that they knew what they were doing, right? They like the athleticism, the big target, right? And now you have 2 middle of the field guys, right? With Luther being able to get his wiggle on with, those linebackers. And now when you got to account for those 2 guys in the middle of the field, that'll open up things for Rome. And
Even DJ Moore too.
And DJ Moore as well, right? We forgot about DJ Moore. So they have that many weapons to where I think it's going to be on Caleb Williams not to focus on one guy or not to try to get this veteran the ball over here or this guy the ball over here. It's like, yo, I'm going to the open guy, right? I think, and that's where I feel like the coaching comes in, right? Where you get an offensive-minded coach to come in and really help you as a quarterback, right? And you
talked about this before with like coaching, right? Because this matters. And I think, when you see a guy like Cole Kmet, who has been a good producer in this offense, kind of have to take a back seat now to Colston Loveland, or you see them take a receiver early in the draft and Luther Burden, you're like, okay, I know these are going to be two immediate pieces, but like Odunze was a first round pick and DJ Moore is one of the better receivers in this league. He's been like that for a long time now. How much does coaching, when a new philosophy comes in and they have their guys or maybe they have their system, should people who are drafting Bears players be absolutely worried about that? Or would you trust the talent of a DJ Moore or Cole Kmet in those situations?
You should definitely be worried about that, because situational coaching wise, it all plays a part, right? I've seen guys that, have 10-year careers after getting cut. Right. And it's like, okay, what happened where you were at before? Right. It wasn't the right space. It wasn't the right system for that guy. I was a system linebacker. I didn't last. Right. More teams start turning towards a 3-4 defense. I was a 4-3 will. Right. Because of my size, I fit in that system. Right. And so, the NFL is all about the system. Right. You get the right guys in the right space. And I think, I don't know if they have a St. Brown to really target and really get all of those, because he's such a standout on that Lions roster. Even though the Lions do have their weapons as well, I think he's more of a standout than you have with the Bears, where it's kind of a collection of guys that have standout ability, right? You don't know, and that becomes dangerous as a defense when you don't know who to focus in on.
That's a really good point. I think they're all kind of sporadic. The draft spots for all these receivers are sporadic. So it's like you have to take DJ Moore the earliest. Odunze has a big leap up that he can make. And I'm really excited about Odunze this year. There's a lot of things expected out of him when he came out of Washington. It's like now he could take that really big step and be the focal point. And you talked about it. Like, you don't know who the St. Brown of this offense is going to be. And although he was in the slot, J-Mo had a really good season last year on the outside. And it's like Rome is probably going to be all over the field. DJ Moore is probably going to be all over the field. And then you talk about the tight ends like Cole Kmet. Maybe he's not a tight end one, and I don't think Colston Loveland is either. But both of those guys can be like tight end twos in your deeper 14, 16-man league. So I think the receiving core, like you talked about, it's going to be tough to trust. But at some point, there's probably going to be value. If I had a bet on somebody, it'd probably would be Odunze. Another thing to talk about on this team is the running game. Like DeAndre Swift, obviously he was their guy and didn't see the same type of success that he had coming off the Eagles, right? Like kind of a decent year, I would say, but not really what Bears fans expected out of DeAndre Swift. And you got Roschon Johnson out of Texas. He was obviously complimentary back when Bijan was there, but like we kind of expected more out of Roschon Johnson as well. I don't know how I feel about this running back room, but we saw what he did with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery and even Jamal Williams in Detroit, what Ben Johnson did. I'm curious about this Chicago team because the offensive line has made a little bit of improvement. The run game, in theory, should be there. I don't know, man. I feel like, they're both going outside the top 20 RBs. DeAndre Swift is, and Roschon Johnson's going outside like the top 50 running backs. Maybe there's some value there.
I think there may be value there getting him late, but at the same time, I think they have a similar problem to the receiver room, right? You just don't know. There's a lot of – you don't know who's going to get the touches. It's not really obvious I think he's going to go with the hot hand, right? I don't know if they're going to have big years on the ground individually, right? But I think it'll be a running back room by committee, and they'll plug and play and do their thing. But I think if one of those guys goes down, it definitely – it'll be worth having that other guy. It'll be worth having the other guy. So if it becomes more of a single, they got to lean on one guy. I think that, that's somebody you can stash on the bench. And if it becomes a one-man job, I think that they'll, because they can both catch the ball as well.
Yeah, I feel like drafting DeAndre Swift means he can't get hurt, which he's been injury prone in the past. And then drafting Roschon is like, oh shit, if he hits, you got potential like an RB2 on your team. So I kind of feel like I like drafting Roschon a little bit more than DeAndre Swift. It wouldn't shock me to see DeAndre Swift have a good year under the system, but like I'm just not banking on it because it's been hard to trust in the past. So I think it all depends on Caleb though. Like if he takes the next step and Ben Johnson's able to, like this team is going to play well. At the top of the show though, Marcus, you did say you thought they'd win the division.
Man, I think
their win total right now is at 8.5 games. So 8.5 games is kind of where they're sitting if you're looking at it. So
I'm
you can either take
over.
the over for plus 135 or the under for minus 160.
I'm taking over. I'm taking over. I'm taking over. I'm taking over. They're gonna be better than 500 for sure, right? And here's the thing: it's a tough division, right? But I think when you get a guy like Ben Johnson, who's been in the division, right? He knows the division that you don't have to research, right? He already knows what works against which defenses, right? And he knows the Lions, right? Which I think is one of their big competitors, right? When you know a team like that, the personnel like that, it matters, right? It matters. You've been competing against that defense in practice, for the last few years. You know who's going to bite. You know what I mean? The thing that I've learned really quick with my time in the NFL is that everybody has first-round draft picks. Everyone has All-Americans. Everyone has guys that were the best their entire life everywhere they went. Right. They all have talent, right? It's just about getting that cohesiveness and getting everybody to flow together, on one accord. Right. And so, I know it's a bold prediction, right? But it's the toughest division for a reason, right? There are going to be a lot of close games. There's going to be a lot of bang, bang. I think, in all honesty, I think the Bears can win it, but I think the Packers can win it. And I also think that the Lions can win it. You know what I mean? Like, I think those three teams, right? And I'm going for the Bears, but I think those three teams all have a shot at winning winning the league. Yeah. And it's going to be very interesting to see how it all plays out.
It will be. And that win total, that defense is getting a lot better too, but that win total kind of feels right, like 8 to 9 wins, where I'd be looking at is like player prop wise, Caleb Williams to be over 3,500 yards passing. Like, I think that might be a lock this year with Ben Johnson there. I think they're going to try to get him to 4,000. Like, that seems to be the thought process here with drafting all these offensive weapons, bringing in an offensive coach, drafting him at the top of the draft last year, trade up. Like, that seems to be it. So if I'm going anything, Caleb Williams over 3,500.5 yards. Let us know your guys' thoughts on the Bears positional players in fantasy and what you think about their outlook overall.